Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to another weekly reading wrap-up where I talk to you about all the books I read this week. This week we have 13 books to talk about, so a little bit less than normal, but I did finish some pretty thick books this week, and whatever, it's still more than most people have read, so I shouldn't be too hard on myself, but you know. Let's go ahead and dive right into this. Let's see what I read. So the first one that I finished was Once Upon a Moonlit Night by Elizabeth Hoyt. This was book 10.5. This was a novella in the Maiden Lane series. I still have a couple of the novellas left, but I probably won't finish them before the live show, which will have been last night when you see this. So go check that out on my channel, where I'm going to talk with some of my friends about all the Maiden Lane books and just gush about them. That's basically what it is, because I want to talk about them all the time, so we're gonna do it. But this one was very exciting to me because there is a character who was treated very poorly by one of our heroes, rolling my eyes because I think he's a douche canoe, and this novella is about her escaping from this man and what happens to her when she escapes. So she is a lady, and she had been kidnapped to be forced into a marriage. And with some help, she's able to escape, but she looks like a ragamuffin. Her dress is ripped, she's muddy, she's dirty, she's been locked in a dungeon for a while. And so she gets picked up by this younger, well, not younger than her, but like this young man who is coming home from his travels because a family member has died, and now he is taking over I think it's an earldom that he's got. And he really doesn't want to be, because the earldom is in debt. And so he's basically having to leave his travels, where he was a bit of like a scientific mind, to come home and solve these problems. He came home with what kind of animal does he have? My brain just kind of went crazy. I just slipped out of my mind, but he comes home with an exotic pet that's really cute, who is sniffing around all the time, and it's adorable. So he ends up rescuing this girl, thinks that she's kind of a liar and a player, but he's feeling in a good mood, so he decides to give her a ride to the next posting inn. Well, when some drama happens at the posting inn, he agrees to take her all the way to London. He's like, I'm sorry that I was being stubborn. Of course I'll make sure you get home safely. Whether or not I think you're being truthful, I'm going to be a good guy here. And this is their romance. It's only 87 pages long, but it was still very powerful, and I was very, very happy to see this character get a happily ever after the way one of our heroes treated her. Can you not tell I hated that hero? I have coffee with me for today because I need it. Then I read an arc of The Devil and the Heiress by Harper St. George. So, most of the arcs I'm going to be reading now for the next couple weeks, which, I mean, when I get to them, none of them come out until June or July, because I got a bunch of historical romances accepted and they just don't come out for a long time. So I will try to remember to bring these books up when it's closer to the time coming out, but I try to read one arc every Sunday. That's my goal. I start it when I'm in church. Yes, I know, it's a thing. We've talked about it before. Including when I read like a male book at church, which is fine. It's fine, but it was dirty. And this is the sequel to The Heiress Gets a Duke. And this one is about the younger sister, Violet, who was supposed to marry Evan in the first one, but she was in love with someone else, and so her sister helped her out. Well, now that man that she was in love with, he gets bought off by her dad. And her dad is up to his old tricks and is going to try to sell her off to someone else. But this time, there's a man named Christian who is a duke. His dukedom's in a bit of a trouble, as it does. And he was actually friends with Evan. And so he had seen Violet before. Now, the thing that I love about Christian is he does need to marry well. He has some lands that need her money. He does. But he doesn't just want to marry someone for money. He does want to marry someone and have a deep connection and be able to share that bond between each other. So he decides that he's going to take Violet And he sees that the choices her father's making, because here's the thing. First, he goes to her father and tries to get her to agree, you know, to see if he can broker a marriage deal. But the father already has somebody else in mind. This is not a good person that he has in mind. He's an asshole, and he is showing abusive tendencies before Violet is fully engaged to him. And also, Violet just can't believe that her parents are doing this to her after her brother had just come back from America to set her parents straight. And now he's doing it, or they're doing it to their next daughter. So it was very frustrating. But anyway, I'll tell you what the plan was, and then I'll tell you how I felt. Because I did like this book. Her parents made me angry. And so she's planning to run away. She's a writer. She's working on a book. She has some money that belongs to herself. And she knows that her older brother will help her out. But will he be able to help her out in time? Because he had come to save August, and then had went back to America, and Evan had went with. Because Evan, if you've read The Heiress Gets the Duke, Evan and her were going to America with her brother. So he's just arrived back in America, and then he finds out what's happening to his sister, and so now he's got to turn around and go back and tell his parents, what the fuck are you doing, you know? The brother is very wonderful, by the way. I believe the next book will probably be about the brother marrying someone. There's a little bit of a setup of that, and I'm very interested because he is a wonderful big brother. He really is. That he would do that for his sisters, that he loves them so much. It really was really heartwarming because her parents are 7 shades of fucked up. Like, I'm honestly appalled. But anyway, so Violet's planning to run away, and Christian gets wind of this because he has a spy in her household. And so he makes himself available as an option to help her run away when he's really planning to compromise her. With her permission, of course, but he's hoping that that will give him some leverage over her father. It's not a great plan. He knows this. So that's kind of the setup. There ends up being an event that happens that makes them trapped together even more so than being in this carriage together. And they have such beautiful chemistry. I won't say anything else. This book isn't out until June. I've already said enough. But the thing that I'll say, I gave this book 4.5 stars. I really liked it. But the first 50 pages with her parents, with the shit that they're putting her through and how cruel they are to her. And I feel like her father is even more like cruel to her because he kind of liked August and was letting her have her thing. He literally thinks his daughter's stupid, I guess. And they're cruel to her. Like, they complete everything she says. It's like they're a brick wall. They don't hear anything. And I was messaging my friends when I was reading it, and I was like, I cannot take her parents. Thankfully, in this one, it's a road trip marriage and a close proximity. It has an only one bed trope. So we're not with her parents for most of the book. Thank goodness. But we were for the beginning, and I just was like, I can't take her parents any longer, and then we weren't with them, so it was okay. Also, the heroine was pretty frustrating at the end of this book for me, but not the same way that August was, and I gave that book like a 3.5 star. This one was a 4.5 star. I loved Violet until that little bit, like right at the end, but it didn't last too long. And I loved the hero again. Like, I really think this author writes really great heroes because I loved Evan. He was my favorite part of The Heiress Gets the Duke. And in The Devil and the Heiress, Christian and Violet are amazing. It's her parents that made it almost unbearable. Then I read Lady of Rooksgrave Manor. I was hoping my physical copy would have shown up by now. I'm waiting for it. It's literally like on the way here. But I read this book based on the recommendations from, like, literally I was seeing it on TikTok, and Katie Robert was talking about it in her April wrap up. And I'd seen a couple other authors on TikTok recommend this as a monster romance, but like an intro. It's also a paranormal historical romance. And it just, look at this cover. Like, I was like, I've already recommended this book in a paranormal romance video that I just put up because I couldn't wait to talk about it more. I do talk about it quite extensively in that paranormal video, but let me give you the setup of this. So again, this is a historical paranormal. It starts with a maid who's working in a house. She is very sexually free and pretty liberated for the time that she lives in. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It is actually like historically accurate that there was a remedy doctors had for women when they were being agitated and full of fits, and that was literally like masturbation, because like there's articles on this. I've actually watched a like episode or two about this before, but they would call it when women like had hysterics, and they would use, they're literally a kind of toy to stimulate an orgasm, and then the women would be more chilled out. This is a thing. But anyway, the reason why I brought that up is because there is a doctor in this series named Jonathan, and what's the heroine's name? I can't remember her name. Damn it. It went out of my head. But she likes to like listen in when the doctor's here and he's administering his cure to the ladies of this house. And he has noticed that this woman has kept her eye on that. And so he actually asks her if she would like to have a rendezvous with him. So he invites her over, and she's like, yeah, I'll have sex with him. And while they're having their sexual encounter, which is really hot, Dr. Jonathan actually turns into Mr. Tanner. So this guy is a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but his Mr. Tanner and him are on good terms with each other. Mr. Tanner comes out when it's time to fuck, and he fucks her as both Jonathan and as Mr. Tanner. And she's totally into it. She's like, oh my God, what's happening? This is amazing. And so he tells her about this home, that it's basically a brothel for women to fuck monsters. So this is a reverse harem monster paranormal. Now, the reason why it's a good intro, number one, like, this is pretty lighthearted for what it's about. Like, there is some darker themes in this because there is some bad monster as well that's trying to do something. But the woman, like, this is a brothel, but like these women are completely in control. There's a madam who's a witch who administers birth control and who helps pair the women with the monsters that are best for them. There are guards there to help them, which they normally don't need because it is very expensive to be a member of this monster brothel, like the men who are part of it. And they follow the rules because they want these places to exist, obviously, so that they can get their kicks and they don't have to hide who they are. Because a lot of the monsters that we meet, they have a human form and then they have a monster form. So this is also a good intro because there isn't a lot of like monster penises if you're not like wanting that in your stuff. I know I'm using a lot of vernacular it's a lot, but it's also, I feel like, a good intro to a reverse harem because the setup makes sense. I mean, it's a brothel, so she's going to be sleeping with more than one people. And the heroine doesn't really have imaginings that she wanted to like be in love with someone. She's looking at this as an adventure. She's going to get paid. She's going to get to try a bunch of different kinds of sex, and she's going to meet some amazing creatures that she never knew existed before. And it's actually her men who are falling in love with her and show her what love is. And it's so beautiful. And I love the hierarchy between the men. There is one MMF scene in here. Some of the men are okay with each other. In fact, some of them actually have had relationships before this woman was in their life because a lot of them are immortal. And yeah, it was really fun. It was so good. And so there's going to be more books in this series, but they're not going to focus on this couple. So this is a standalone if you want to read it that way. I believe that the villain is going to carry over, but we find out during this book that there are many houses like this around the world, so maybe we'll go to a different house. There was some characters we met here that I could see there being a book about them. I'd really like to see there one where there's like a female, like that there's like a male who has like female monsters. I don't know. That would be fascinating to me. So I love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. The only thing that kept it from being a 6-star is that there were some parts of the plot where like it's just tricky when you have this many things going on. Like for how powerful like our men were, the villain, I was kind of like, how is he able to do this kind of thing? But it wasn't enough to detract from this story. I was surprised how much story there actually was to this, right? Because some reverse harems, it's just so that we can fuck whoever we want, which I don't have a problem with that either. So 5 stars for this. I loved it. Then I read The Chase by Elle Kennedy. I have never read any books in the Briar series. It's the last series by Elle Kennedy that I haven't read. And so I had the audiobook. I got it when there was a sale on Audible. And all of these books are actually available at Barnes & Noble lately. They have Elle Kennedy, which is super cool to find her in Barnes & Nobles lately. I've seen that other people have seen her at Barnes & Nobles as well, so that's cool. This one was a tough opening for me. Number one, because I was downshifting from a lot of historicals, and I had just read Lady of Rooksgrave Manor before this. So to downshift into college drama was tough. Like, I had to like change my mindset. And this is the downside sometimes of changing genres, because I was like, the heroine, I was like, seriously, your problems are so minor. But that's what you're in for. Like, you're not looking for the weight of the world. So this has a hockey player. This has a girl named, what's her name? Summer. And then Colin Fitzgerald. And they end up being roommates together. They had an almost moment before. But Fitz has kind of put her in the category as like a stuck up, fake, shallow girl. Like, he's put her in that category in his own head to try to keep her in a box. And it's not great. Like, it's not great that he did that. But she, in my opinion, really did like fulfill that in a lot of ways until we start to learn more about her, which is the point. But she has had to switch schools because the sorority that she used to live in, she burned part of it down on accident, but it was her fault. And so she got kicked out of that school, and now she's going to be going to Briar U, which is where a few of our faves have went before. And her brother is actually, I can't remember who her brother is, but we know who her brother is. We've seen him in the Off-Campus series. So they end up all as roommates because she needs a place to stay, and so she's rooming with 3 guys. And this did have great representation for, she has a learning disability. She doesn't have dyslexia, but she has ADHD mixed with a few other things. And so she does need additional help with schooling. And I really appreciated that representation, that even this, you know, rich, preppy, smart, popular girl, like, you can still have a learning disability. And so I did appreciate that. And I appreciated the moments where the hero was helping her in ways. But yeah, the downsides of this one for me was that our heroine flirts and goes on dates with one of the other roommates who's not endgame multiple times, up until like 60% into this book, when there's finally more stuff happening with our main hero. And it was just, it drug on way too long. And then we went from not 0, but we went from like 20 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. And it was very stressful. However, the way that this book ended, there's a situation that our heroine is put in by one of her teachers. And the way that it was handled just made me feel so happy. Made me feel so good. The way that they stuck it to this person who was a total dick, I really liked. So I did end up giving this 4 stars. It just took me a while because being thrown back into college after what I was reading was tough. Then I read Turning Back by JS Huss. This is the second book in her Turning Point series. The first book was it wasn't really a reverse harem. It was a menage, but it was a 4-people menage. Like, the people in the book call it a menage. And that, like, you can see my wrap up from last week to see a bit more about it. This is a series, like, I honestly can't tell you that much about because of how it plays out is so strange. So this was such a unique series. It was very sexy. It isn't as dark as the cover would lead you to believe. I will say that. Like, there was some very good communication and some bad communication. And this one had a surprise baby trope. I'll like tell you that. And I don't know, like, I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. And I read the third one, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So, final one in this series. And And I was kind of disappointed in this one because this was the hero that I was most excited to like be with his POV the most. And he was just an asshole. And here's the thing. He has the setup that he's supposed to be an asshole. That's his character. Well, that's not a good character trait. I'm an asshole. No, that's not a great character trait. And it was just really frustrating for me because I'd seen him not be an asshole a lot. Like, we've seen him be. So then to backtrack to him being an asshole, I just didn't have a lot of patience for it. And I also didn't like the heroine of this one that much. So I gave this one 3 stars. But it did set up the next series, which is about a character who, like, doesn't end up with anyone in this one. And I kind of want to read that series. So maybe I will. Maybe I'm not done with JS Huss yet. No, I'm just kidding. I was never going to be done because I like some of her other series. Then I read Ruthless People by JJ McAvoy. And this was our buddy read for this month. So in my Discord, I do a buddy read with everyone monthly, and this was the one that got picked on the spinner wheel. This is a mafia romance. This was one of the most brutal ones I've ever read, okay? And I had a lot of feelings about it. You can see a lot of my thoughts as I was reading it if you go to the Discord server. The link is always down below. And I know a lot of people were loving it because some people started reading it even last month. And so I was really excited to get started. And it was very interesting. It has the Irish mafia and the Italian mafia. And they are going to be having their princess and heir get married to each other. And this is an arranged marriage. So it starts with our hero having one final fuck with his mistress because they are going to be faithful to each other. That is part of the deal, is that they will be sure that all their children belong to them and that it's going to work out and it's going to be fine. So when our hero goes to meet his lady, they discover that the capo of the Italian mafia, he has cancer and he's been sick for a while. And his daughter, Melody, has been running the mafia this whole time for the last 2 years. So when he comes to meet his lady, she's in the basement torturing someone. And she kills this guy's mistress in front of him. And she's a badass motherfucker. Now, first off, Liam, he thinks he needs to dominate this woman because he's like, I'm going to be the one in charge, not this bitch. And so he comes in guns blazing and is a complete dick. And he ends up shot in the leg his first meeting with her because he tries to get fresh with her. And she's like, motherfucker, that's not going to happen. And she shoots him. She shoots him. And it begins with a lot of antagonism. And it really reminded me of like Brutal Prince. But not, Brutal Prince is not as brutal as Ruthless People's was. But it reminded me of Ada and Callum just a little bit. Although Ada doesn't like like that parts of it. But they just are having this clashing back and forth and things aren't going well until Liam kind of has a moment of clarity and he's like, isn't this a good thing to have a woman who can meet me literally blow for blow and isn't going to be upset if I have to kill someone and isn't going to be, you know, hurt when we have business to handle on a Christmas morning or something like that. And so Liam actually starts to become pretty infatuated with her, which is kind of cool to see him falling first and Melody being like, I don't know if I know how to love anyone. Like the only one I've loved is my dad. And that was still this kind of like, you know, conditional love of make sure that you do well, right? So it's very fascinating, very fascinating. The story was very intense. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. And the thing that knocked it down, okay, so now we'll talk about what I didn't love so much. And I'm just like, gotta be honest. So this book was very gory and brutal and kind of made me hate the characters a little. So for the first 50% of this book, I was like, yeah, these guys are hate fucking each other and they are murdering people together, and they are ruling their city together. They are take no prisoners. People fear them. It's great. But they're very brutal. Like, they kill women and children. That mistress that she shot in the beginning, she was pregnant, and she knows that woman's pregnant, and she shoots her in the face. And they are willing to go after police officers' wives and children. We see them bomb places. And I know that they're criminals. Like, it's one of the reasons why mafia books are always a dark romance, even if they don't have dubious consent and scary things, because they are criminals. And that's a dark romance, to love a criminal. But something that I don't really want to see in my mafia is I don't want to be faced with how evil they are, because to me, this is a fantasy. I'm reading a fantasy option. So even when I read about a hero who has taken someone captive, usually the only person we like see that happening to is like the heroine, and then we see them going on their journey, and it's beautiful and all that stuff. And to see people like willfully murder people and gleefully plan to like burn down all these things, it was just a lot for me. And some people are just freaking loving it. And I understand why, because it's great to see them as like a couple just be this chaos together. But when something bad happens to the heroine, and I'm going to tell you what it is because it's a trigger warning, there is a loss of a child, like miscarriage or like forced abortion, miscarriage. I'm not fully sure what happens to her, but her baby is taken from her. I didn't feel bad. And I feel horrible saying that, because losing a child is a trigger for me, and they were both happy for this baby. But this woman is evil, in my opinion. And I honestly didn't want them to have a baby. And the fact that she would shoot a pregnant woman in the face who had nothing to do with what was going on, I'm like, well, why does your baby get to live? And these are not the moral questions that I want to be thinking when I'm reading a mafia book. And it was just very uncomfortable for me that this book was giving me those feelings, that I was happy that this happened to her. So I know that a lot of people love this whole series. I might be interested in continuing, but definitely not right away, because I just need there to be more hope in the series for me. And I honestly need them to be better people than this. Like, they don't have to be perfect. Like Ramo Falcone, he's not great, but they don't hurt kids. They don't kill babies. And you've literally become baby killers. And I don't want to see it. Like, that may be what the mafia is in reality. But when I'm reading fiction, yeah, I want it to be glitzed up. I want them to have their hard line where we won't go over this line. And I didn't see one at all. There are no lines on the ground that I've seen. And I don't know if this series is about them realizing they can't be this evil, realizing that there's no peace for them if they stay this evil. I don't know. But I don't want to find out, because I don't care. But somehow I still gave this 4 stars because it was really unique to me. Haven't read one quite like that. And I was very enraptured by a lot of what was happening. It's just when I finished the book and was thinking about it, I realized that I didn't want them to win. Like, I wanted there to be a police officer strong enough to stand up to them. And I wanted there to be politicians who will fight them back. Like, that's what I left the book with. And I don't want to feel that about my leading people. Then I finished Say No More. This was also funny because this book has the same narrator as Ruthless people did, which was funny to me. So this is the second book in, I don't even know what this trilogy is called. I think it said it's the Sacramento trilogy by Karen Rose. This is a romantic suspense. This picks up where the other one left off. I can't remember the first one's name. Say No More. What's the first one's name? Say You're Sorry. And I actually, when I finished this book, I went and looked on NetGalley to see if the third one had an arc out, and it does, and I got it, so I'm going to continue this series, even though these are thick, and I don't have an audiobook for the e-arc, so I'm kind of nervous about that. But this book, this time around, is about a woman named Mercy Callahan. She is also from the cult named Eden that her brother, who was in the last book, is from. And she has been hiding from her brother all this time that she's been free because she believed her brother abandoned them. She did not know that her brother left because he was raped and their mother snuck him out. She thought that their brother just ran away because the mother could never tell her what really happened in case she would like tell someone. So in our last book, she finds out what really happened to her brother. And so there's a lot of things that she needs to kind of like fess up about, things that she hid from him. And her abuser, her husband, he's not her husband, he's her rapist. He has now seen her picture in the paper after she was involved in the last one, and now he's coming for her. So his name is Ephraim, and he was a disgusting parasite who would like to marry the 13-year-old brides and rape them until they were too old for him. And he's coming after Mercy. So I'm really loving this series. Romantic suspense is not going to be a new staple for me, but these books were given, like the first book was given to me by a channel member, and I'm really glad that I did read it. I'm really invested in this story, but I will tell you that reading this much book that takes place over like a week's amount of time is a lot. There are POVs from many, many people in this book. Particularly a good chunk of it is given to the killer, the bad guy. But some things that I like. He's very smart. Both the bad people in these books have been very smart. But our heroes, and there are a lot of heroes in this book, there's a whole family of law enforcement who is supportive. There is Mercy's family. There are so many good people, but you can feel it that makes us a big target. Because when you love a lot of people, you have a lot to lose. And I felt it when I was reading this. I was very anxious for everyone because I was like, oh my God, who are we going to lose? What's going to happen? I'm scared. And yeah, it's just, she builds it very well. Like she builds it all up very well, but it's a lot, right? Like this is a lot. And the romance part of it, we're dealing with a heroine who has a lot of baggage, and there was, only a couple like steamy scenes in here, but I loved our hero. So I understand why people like these kind of books. This is one that was really easy. I listened to it while I was at work. I really enjoyed it. And again, I got the arc for the third one because I want to know how this ends. I know what they're going to do in the final book, and I'm like ready for them to take down this horrible place. Because the thing that is very interesting in this one is that Mercy actually had a good stepfather when she lived in Eden. So her mother was married to a man, and then her mother was taken away from him and like given to someone else. But she got to stay with him until she was 13, right? Until she had to marry this fucking monster. And he was a loving and wonderful man. He was someone who, when he was forced to take a child bride, he did not sleep with her until she was 19, and she wanted to be with him because he had been raised in this cult too. He'd been raised there, he'd been brainwashed, but he still knew when certain things weren't right or wrong. And we get to see someone from inside the cult who's just as brainwashed as everyone else, who from some points of view would look to be a villain because he was taking a child bride as well. But some people were still forced as well, and he made the best and was as honorable as he could be within the confines of where he was. And so I really appreciated getting to see that. I appreciated seeing that Mercy could still love him so much because she realized how lucky she was that in that situation to have a stepdad who cared for her and has longed for her all this time. And when he hears that she didn't die, that she's been alive, he's ready to blow it all up so he can see her again. And it just gave me so much hope. It just made me happy. And so that's why I am trucking through these books, even though they're not my normal jam. And it's a lot. So this was 4 stars for me. I feel like if you love romantic suspense, this is probably a 5-star for you. I'm just being honest that it doesn't fully give me everything I want. So it's not like a 5-star. But for where it sits, it's really good. It's really good. Then I read The Rebel by Sophie Lark. This was her newest release. This is the next book in the Kingmaker series, and this one is about Miles Griffin, who is the son of Ada and Callum, and I was so excited to read this. I did a very extensive review for this on my Goodreads because, number one, I really care about this author, and I wanted to give her, like, not because I wanted to give her a good review. The book still had to be good, but I wanted to give detailed thoughts on what I liked and didn't like, which I don't always do. It is something I struggle with. I'm better at talking about what I like about a book than like writing it down. I don't know. So this one has a heroine named Zoe who is entering Kingmakers with a sword over her head. She has been in an arranged agreement with this fucking psycho named Rocco for a few years. And he is pissed that he hasn't been able to fuck with her enough. So he forces her family to make her little sister go to Kingmakers as well, whose name is Kat. And he knows that he can hold Kat over Zoe's head. And if she doesn't play along with his games, he can torture Kat. So Zoe is just, her dad doesn't care what she feels. He's more than ready to just hand her over to Rocco. His family is going to get something out of the marriage agreement, and so he's ready to just hand her over to Rocco. Now we have Miles Griffin, who is kind of the top man on campus. He runs an extensive like underground commodities thing where if there's something you need on Kingmakers, you go to him and he gets it for you. And he's a devil may care. He doesn't step into people's situations. He's here to make the connections. And when Kingmaker is over, he's ready to live his life, right? But one day he sees Rocco tormenting Zoe. And he can't help but step in. He just can't stop himself. And Rocco is like, don't fuck with me. She's mine. Like, no one's going to save her from me. Don't make any enemies here. Back off. And then he talks with Zoe. Miles talks with Zoe. And he realizes the fire that she has and what a great woman that she is. And he decides that he wants her. And of course, she wants him back. This isn't just a one-sided thing, but she's like, it's never going to work. You know, he has my sister held over my head. My dad is never going to let me out of this contract. And you don't want to start a war for me. Like, you can't start a war for me. And he's like, honey, just watch what I'm going to do. And there's also some beautiful aspects of dominance and submission in their sex life in this book that was so beautiful, because there is a line about this. Like, Rocco, being an asshole, says to goad Miles on once that, like, there's something about having this woman, like, obeying you that's a turn on. And Miles is like, fuck you. And then when he's having this situation with Zoe, because she does like to submit in the bedroom, right, to someone she trusts and someone who loves her. And Miles is like, well, that's one thing me and this sicko can agree on. It is something to have Zoe at your beck and call when you have this trust between you. And they have some really beautiful love scenes in this. And I mean, Sophie Lark does those very well. And so this was a 5-star read for me. And I was just so, like, there is some stuff in here that is really tough. Like, there is a situation that happens that I couldn't believe that Sophie went there. Like, I was like, whoa, you really did this. That happened. It was crazy. And then the setup for the bully, I was not expecting. And I'm very excited for the bully to come out next month. So, there we go. Enough about that. Then I read Barbarians Prize by Ruby Dixon. This was book 6 in the series. I think I'm on the right number. This one was about Tiffany and Ryuk. I don't know how to say the name. Tiffany is one of the humans who was assaulted by the aliens. There isn't a graphic depiction of this assault, but this is someone dealing with trauma. Because of her trauma, she really does not want to resonate because she's afraid of sex. She's terrified when anyone tries to touch her. But she's one of the 2 humans who hasn't resonated yet, and so the men are really vying for her attention as a mate. She makes a connection with Ruluk and begins practicing intimacy with him. But she's very worried about upsetting others. So she continues to let these other men vie for her attention and not choose Ruluk for herself. And that led me to be very frustrated with this heroine. And I know it's supposed to be because she had trauma, but she literally strings these guys along and then is terrified of telling them she's picked someone else, to the point that it is kind of disrespectful to Ruluk, what she's doing. And I know she can't help herself, so I tried to be patient, but it went on way too long. And these aren't very long books. So by the time that she finally snaps, I was just nope. I wasn't here for it at all. The setup for the next book is very exciting though, because that one's going to be a hate to love for sure, and I'm very excited about it. But I did give this one 3 stars, which is a bummer because the last one was a 5-star. Then I read King Consort by J.R. Gray. This was one of my TBR picks. It was just some random ones where I tried to pick random books off of my owned TBR because I'm trying to be good and read those. This one is about the Crown Prince, and he ends up falling in love with because he's gay and he's been keeping it a secret for a long time. And he goes on a royal tour in Canada, and he ends up falling for an American paparazzo who gets sent to photograph him. And they meet in a gay bar one night. And when the prince finds out who he is, they start a relationship. And it was really cute. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Ugly Duchess by Eloisa James. This was a reread for me. This was a TBR pick as well, to reread a fairy tale, or read a fairy tale retelling. And I picked this one because I was wanting to reread some Eloisa James. Here's a step back. This one is a friends to enemies to lovers. This is a marriage in trouble. This is a pirate romance. This book has so much going on. This is about Theo and James, and they've been raised together because James's father is her guardian, even though she has her mother with her, but her father's friend is James's dad, and so they've kind of been raised together. And now she's coming of age. She's 17 years old. James is only 19. They're both very young. And it turns out that his father has been embezzling her money. So if James doesn't marry Theo, it's going to come out that he wasted this money. But if she marries him, James would be in charge of the money anyway. James doesn't look at Theo that way. She's actually considered ugly because she is tall and doesn't have the features of everyone else, whatever the reasons are. And he doesn't see her as ugly, but he looks at her like a sister or a friend. And his father is she is an heiress, so she will have her pick of men. So you have to make her believe you love her. And she'll be willing to believe that because you've grown up together and she already has a crush on you. And James is just feeling so guilty. But when he starts to look at Theo that way, he's this might not be bad, being married to my best friend. And so that ends up happening. They end up getting married. They have a crazy passion for each other for 2 days. And then James' drunken father spills the beans, what he did. And Theo is humiliated and hurt, and she banishes him from the home, not believing that he actually does it. Because again, they're 17 and 19. They're babies. And so he goes off and joins a pirate hunting ship and becomes kind of a privateer. And he's gone for 7 years. During that time, Theo becomes a fashion icon. She designs, well, not like a designer, but she creates fabrics, and she really builds up the family business and ends up making everything quite profitable. And it's amazing. But it is rumored that James is dead, and so they have to wait a certain amount of years before declaring him dead. And just when they're about to declare him dead, he finds out about it and returns to declare himself alive. Now he is this big, strong, tanned, tattooed, beautiful pirate. And she is this prim and proper, buttoned up, perfectly articulate, definitely has OCD, and is just like, let's get a divorce. I thought you were dead. I don't want to be around you. But that passion that they have between them is not gone. In fact, it is only matured and grown. And he has longed for her all these years, realizing that he shouldn't have been sent away so easily, but not knowing how to come back. And now it had been 7 years. So I gave this 4.5 upon the reread. I had rated it as a 5 when I was like batch rating books back in the day, because I read this book before Goodreads. And the thing about it is that all of that time that I'm talking about, we see it happen. I don't generally like big time jumps, but as I've said, if we get little snippets of what's happening during that time, it's usually okay for me. But this definitely is a slow burn for them to get back together. However, there is the last chapter of this book is a very long chapter. And it has some discussions and realizations where they really hash out everything that happened about who they were as children and who they are now. That just makes all of that worth it. Because the feelings of rejection he was feeling, the guilt that he's been feeling, the things that kept him away, he never got to make up with his father. He regrets that so much. That's part of the reason he stayed away so long too, is he was ashamed that he didn't fix things sooner. And Theo has just built up such a shell around herself, a wall around herself after being abandoned and being judged by people so harshly that it's going to be hard for him to crack it. But I really loved the reread of this. I read Dirty Ties by Pam Godwin. I gave this 4 stars. I think this is a book you should go into pretty blind. It has illegal motorcycle racing. It has a woman who is in a marriage with her best friend, but he's gay. They've been married for a long time. They share their partners sometimes, but they're coming to a point in this arrangement where he really wants to have someone that he's in love with. And she wants him to have that because they're best friends. She is obsessed with illegal motorcycle racing, so she goes and does that on the sly, and there's this one particular racer named Evader that she has the hots for, and that's all that I'm gonna say about it. Trigger warnings, actually not a lot. Trying to think, like, yeah, I don't think there's really any trigger warnings for this one. I'm trying to think through everything. I think you're pretty good. So, I only have one more Pam Godwin, guys. I'm excited. And then the last book I want to mention, I just finished last night, and that is The Lady and the Orc by Finley Fenn. I read this when I was on Monster TikTok, and I grabbed it after I read The Lady of Rooksgrave Manor, and I was very excited to give it a try, and I was really hooked in the beginning of this story. This has Lady Jewel, who is in a very abusive marriage with her husband, and he leaves her to fight the orcs. He leaves her palace completely undefended and is like, you'll be fine. Immediately after he leaves, they get attacked by orcs, and the captain of the orcs, Grimmer, wants to make her his mate. He's been watching her for quite a while, waiting for her husband to leave. He believes that she will be a good mate to him because the orcs, they are all male, and they need human women to have their babies. And usually that doesn't go too well. Usually it's women being kidnapped, but they don't usually have to coerce them because there's something about the orcs that literally just, they're very sexual to the women. I don't know how else to say it. And Grimmer kind of makes a play for her, and he says, he's like, I've seen how your husband treats you. He doesn't respect you. He left you here alone. If you're my mate, you will be the wife of the most powerful orc. I can give you pleasure you've never known before. Let's make it happen. She's a bit hesitant, but she's like, let's go with it. Has a great sexual experience with him, and I was here for it. Like, I was like, wow, what a strong opening. It's kind of insta-lusty, but I was like, but also it's her trying to give a fuck you to her husband, so I was like, it works for me. But then he gets kind of cruel, and when she brings this up to him, they have a talk about it. We think it's getting better, and then it just goes in these cycles. And the thing that just tips me over the edge was that the final situation that they're in, the hero makes a choice that no romance hero would ever do, ever. And I just couldn't get behind it at all. Like, I was done. So I gave this book 2.5 stars. Sure, his big dick and lots of cum was exciting, whatever. But by the end of it, I was just starting to get disgusted because I hated him. I loved him for so much of this book. But he was really good at talking the talk and not walking the walk. And it fell apart for me. It did not work. So I was disappointed. But all right, there we go. I had less books to talk about and I talked more. That's how it goes. But thank you so much for watching this video. I put up new videos 3 to 4 times a week, and you can check some of those out right now. Bye.